Admiral Kalthus stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the stars through the huge window in front of him. The Vraxian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid was theirs. Every alien race bowed to their power. Nothing moved in space without their permission. The Admiral's skin was pale blue, and his 6 arms moved gracefully as he checked different control panels. His race, the Vraxians, were the smartest beings in the galaxy. At least, that's what everyone believed. They had the biggest ships, the strongest weapons, and the most complete records of everything that existed. A loud beep came from the communication system. Captain Veltar's face appeared on the screen. He looked worried, which was strange. Vraxian captains never looked worried. "Admiral, we found something strange," Veltar said. His voice was shaky. "There's a ship here, but it's not in our records. We've never seen anything like it." Admiral Kalthus felt confused. This was impossible. The Empire had detailed files on every ship design, every weapon, every piece of technology in the galaxy. They had been collecting this information for thousands of years. "Show me," the Admiral ordered. The screen changed to show what Captain Veltar was seeing. There was indeed a ship floating in space, but it looked wrong somehow. It was smaller than most Vraxian ships, with smooth curves instead of sharp angles. Strange lights moved across its surface in patterns that made no sense. What species built this? Admiral Kalthus asked. "We don't know, sir. The computer can't identify it. The energy readings are completely unknown." This made the Admiral even more confused. The Vraxian computers contained information about every known form of energy, every type of engine, every kind of shield. How could there be readings they didn't recognize? "Approach carefully," the Admiral told Captain Veltar. "Try to make contact." Far away from this conversation, Captain Hyunwoo Kim sat in a very different kind of ship. The bridge was smaller and had a warm feeling to it. Unlike the cold metal of Vraxian ships, this one felt alive somehow. Soft lights glowed from panels that seemed to be made of crystal and metal mixed together. Hyunwoo was human, though the Vraxians didn't know humans existed. Earth was far from the main galaxy, in a region the Empire considered empty and worthless. For hundreds of years, humans had watched the Vraxians from a distance, learning about them, studying their technology. "Captain," said Ji-Yun Park, the tactical officer, "the Vraxian fleet is moving toward us. 12 big ships." Hyunwoo nodded. He had expected this. "Are we ready, Dongmin?" Dongmin Lee, the chief engineer, checked his instruments. "The quantum drive is working perfectly. We can disappear whenever you want." The human ship was using technology the Vraxians had never seen before. Instead of normal engines that pushed against space, it used quantum mechanics to exist in multiple places at once. To Vraxian sensors, it would seem to flicker in and out of reality. Back on the Vraxian fleet, Captain Veltar was getting more nervous. His 12 ships surrounded the strange vessel, but every time they tried to scan it, the readings changed. Sometimes it appeared to be made of metal. Sometimes it seemed to be pure energy. Sometimes it wasn't there at all. "This is Captain Veltar of the Vraxian Empire," he broadcast to the unknown ship. "Identify yourself immediately." Hyunwoo smiled as he heard the message. He understood the Vraxian language perfectly. Humans had been listening to their communications for decades. But he didn't answer. Not yet. "Sir," said one of Veltar's officers, "the energy readings are increasing. Something's happening." On the human ship, Dongmin checked his controls one last time. "Quantum displacement ready, Captain." "Do it," Hyunwoo said quietly. To the Vraxians, what happened next was impossible. The strange ship seemed to split into dozens of copies of itself. Each copy moved in a different direction, some toward the Vraxian fleet, some away. The copies looked real on all sensors, but when the Vraxians fired their weapons, the energy beams passed right through most of them. Captain Veltar watched in horror as his fleet fired at targets that weren't really there. But some of the human ship copies were real, and they fought back with weapons that defied understanding. Beams of light that seemed to bend space itself struck his ships. The beams passed through their shields as if the shields didn't exist. "How is this possible?" Veltar shouted. "Our shields are the strongest in the galaxy." But his ships were taking damage. Real damage. One by one, the massive Vraxian warships began to explode. The strange weapons didn't just destroy the ships. They seemed to make them disappear, as if they had never existed at all. Veltar tried to send a message to Admiral Kael'thas, but the communication system was damaged. He managed to send only a few words. Unknown technology, impossible weapons, we can't. Then his ship exploded in a flash of light that looked wrong, like it was the wrong color for fire. Admiral Kael'thas stared at his communication screen, in shock. The signal from Battle Group Epsilon had just stopped. Completely. 12 of the Empire's strongest ships had vanished in minutes. He immediately sent scout ships to investigate. When they arrived at the location, they found something. That made no sense. There were pieces of Vraxian ships floating in space, but they were wrong somehow. The metal had been changed at a basic level, as if the very atoms had been rearranged. The strange enemy ship was gone. The scouts found energy readings that their instruments couldn't identify. According to every law of physics the Vraxians knew, these readings were impossible. Admiral Kael'thas called his science officers to the bridge. "Analyze these readings," he ordered. "I want to know what kind of weapon could do this." The scientists worked for hours, but they found nothing in their databases. No known technology could create these energy patterns. No known species had weapons that could affect matter at the atomic level like this. "Sir," said the head scientist, "these readings suggest technology that operates on principles we don't understand. It's as if someone found a completely different way to manipulate reality." The Admiral felt something he had never experienced before: fear. In 3,000 years, the Vraxian Empire had never encountered anything they couldn't understand, and defeat. Their technology was supreme. Their knowledge was complete. Or so they had believed. Meanwhile, the human ship Silent Running moved through space using its quantum drive. To any observer, it would seem to flicker in and out of existence. Captain Hyunwoo looked at his crew with satisfaction. "First test successful," he said. "Send the report to Earth Command. Tell them the Vraxians react exactly as we predicted when faced with technology they can't understand." Ji-Yun Park smiled. "Their biggest weakness is their confidence. They believe they know everything, so they can't adapt when they meet something new." Dongmin Lee was already preparing for the next phase. "The quantum displacement system worked perfectly. We can hit them anywhere and disappear before they can respond." Hyunwoo nodded. The humans had spent decades preparing for this moment. They had studied Vraxian psychology, technology, and tactics. They knew exactly how the Empire would react to an unknown threat. The Vraxians would search their archives desperately, trying to find an explanation. They would send bigger fleets with more powerful weapons, but none of it would help, because they were facing something that simply didn't exist in their carefully catalogued universe. As the Silent Running vanished into quantum space, Admiral Kael'thas was already sending emergency messages to the Empire's capital. Battle Group Epsilon had been destroyed by an unknown enemy using impossible technology. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Vraxian Empire faced a mystery they couldn't solve. The galaxy was about to change forever. Emperor Zixthul sat on his golden throne in the center of the galaxy's largest palace. The throne room was enormous, with walls that stretched up so high they disappeared into darkness. Holographic displays showed maps of the entire galaxy, with millions of green dots representing Vraxian-controlled worlds. The Emperor had ruled for 800 years. In all that time, no one had ever brought him news like this. His 4 eyes glowed red with anger as he read Admiral Kael'thas's report again. "Impossible," he said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "There are no unknown species. There are no unrecorded technologies. We have files on everything that exists." The Emperor's advisors stood in a circle around his throne. They were the smartest Vraxians alive, experts in every field of science and warfare. But now they all looked confused and scared. "Your Majesty," said Scholar Quindara, the Empire's head of xenoarchaeology, "we have searched every database. We have checked every file from the last 3,000 years. There is no record of any species that could build weapons like this." Emperor's anger grew stronger. "Then search harder! Check the archives again! Someone must have made a mistake!" Scholar Quindara bowed low. She was very old, even for a Vraxian, and had spent her entire life studying other species. We have already begun a complete review of all records, Your Majesty, but our archives are perfect. We have never missed anything before. This was true. The Vraxian Empire kept detailed records of everything they found. When they discovered a new planet, they recorded every animal, every plant, every rock. When they met a new species, they studied their culture, their technology, their weaknesses. When they invented new weapons, they tested them against every known defense. Their archives contained information on over 10 million different species. They had files on spacecraft designs that were older than most civilizations. They knew the chemical composition of atmospheres on planets they had never even visited. But now, for the first time in their history, something had happened that wasn't in their files. Far away from the Emperor's palace, on a human research ship called the Meridian, Dr. Shung-Ho Choi was listening to Vraxian communications. The humans had learned how to break Vraxian codes decades ago so they could hear everything the Empire was saying. "They're panicking," he told Commander So-Young-Yoon, who was in charge of humanity's first contact team. "They've called emergency meetings on every major world. They're searching through their archives like crazy." So-Young smiled. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had spent years studying Vraxian psychology. "This is exactly what we expected. Their whole civilization is based on the idea that they know everything. When they meet something they don't understand, they can't handle it." Dr. Shung-Ho nodded. "The funny thing is they actually do have records about us, but they're so old and buried so deep that they've forgotten about them. This was humanity's greatest advantage. Long ago, when the Vraxian Empire was much smaller, they had sent scouts to Earth's solar system. But Earth was just a small blue planet with primitive life, so they had marked it as unimportant and moved on. The records were still there, hidden in the deepest parts of their archives, but no one had looked at them for thousands of years. Back in the palace, Emperor Zixthul was growing more impatient. "How long will this search take?" he demanded. "The archives contain the history of 3,000 years, Your Majesty," Scholar Quindara explained. "There are billions of files to check. Even with our fastest computers, it will take weeks to review everything." The Emperor stood up from his throne. When he was angry, he was terrifying to look at. His skin turned darker blue, and electricity crackled around his 6 arms. "We don't have weeks! What if these unknown attackers strike again? What if they attack our core worlds?" Admiral Kael'thas stepped forward. He had traveled here as fast as his ship could fly. "Your Majesty, I recommend we prepare our defenses. We should gather the largest fleet in our history and—" "With what intelligence?" the Emperor interrupted. "How do we fight an enemy we know nothing about? How do we defend against weapons we don't understand?" This was the heart of the Vraxian problem. For 3,000 years they had won every war because they always knew more than their enemies. They would study their opponents carefully, learn their weaknesses, and then attack with precisely the right weapons and tactics. But now they faced an enemy that seemed to know everything about them while they knew nothing in return. On Earth, in a secret military base buried deep underground, General Minsu Park was reading reports from the human ships in space. Earth looked much different now than it had when the Vraxians first visited. Cities of glass and metal stretched across continents. Ships that could travel faster than light moved between Earth and its colonies on other worlds. But Earth was still, hidden from the Empire. Humans had learned to make their technology invisible to Vraxian sensors. Their cities were shielded, their ships were cloaked, and their communications were sent through quantum channels that the Vraxians couldn't detect. "Phase 1 is complete," General Park announced to his staff. "The Vraxians are confused and scared. They're pulling ships back from the frontier to protect their core worlds. This gives us more freedom to move." Dr. Kyung-Soo Bae, Earth's chief historian, raised his hand. "General, our teams have identified the exact location of the old Earth survey records in the Vraxian archives. Should we try to delete them?" General Park shook his head. "No, let them find the records eventually. When they do, they'll realize they had the information all along but ignored it. That will make them even more confused and angry." Back in the Vraxian palace, teams of scientists worked day and night searching through the archives. They used the most powerful computers in the galaxy, machines that could process millions of files per second. But the task was enormous. The archives weren't just files on computers. They included physical artifacts, samples of alien technology, even preserved specimens of extinct species. Everything was cataloged and cross-referenced in a system so complex that it took years of training just to understand how to use it. Scholar Quindara hadn't slept in 3 days. Her team had checked weapon designs, energy patterns, and spacecraft configurations. They had looked through records of every known species, including ones that had been extinct for millennia. "Nothing," she reported to the Emperor. "We have found nothing that matches the energy signatures from the battle. These weapons operate on principles that don't exist in our physics textbooks." The Emperor was becoming desperate. "What about theoretical technologies? What about experimental weapons that were never built?" "We've checked those too, Your Majesty. Even our most advanced theoretical physics can't explain how these weapons work. They seem to affect matter at the quantum level in ways that should be impossible." What the Vraxians didn't understand was that human technology had developed along completely different lines. While the Vraxians focused on making bigger and stronger weapons, humans had learned to manipulate the basic forces of reality itself. Human scientists had discovered that consciousness could affect quantum mechanics. By using specially trained pilots who could think in certain ways, they could make their ships exist in multiple realities at once. Their weapons didn't just destroy matter, they convinced reality that the target had never existed in the first place. Dr. Yoon-Young Shin, Earth's top linguist, was monitoring Vraxian communications from the research ship New Dawn. She was fluent in over 50 Vraxian dialects and could understand not just their words, but the emotions behind them. "They're getting desperate," she reported to Captain Jae-min Ko. "I can hear the fear in their voices. Some of them are even starting to wonder if their archives might be incomplete." This was a revolutionary thought for a Vraxian. Their entire culture was built on the belief that knowledge was power and that they had all the knowledge that mattered. The idea that they might not know everything was like suggesting that gravity might stop working. Captain Ko smiled. "Let them wonder. The more they doubt themselves, the easier our job becomes." As days passed, the search of the archives continued. More and more Vraxian scientists joined the effort. They brought in experts from every field, specialists who had spent centuries studying specific types of technology or alien biology, but they found nothing because they were looking for the wrong things. They searched for advanced weapons, for powerful energy sources, for evidence of a militaristic civilization. They never thought to look for records of a small, peaceful planet whose inhabitants were just beginning to understand fire when the Vraxian scouts visited. Emperor Zixthul grew more frustrated with each passing day. Reports came in from across the galaxy of Vraxian fleets jumping at shadows, of sensors detecting phantom signals that turned out to be nothing. The entire military was on edge, waiting for an attack that could come from anywhere at any time. "Your Majesty," Scholar Quindara said during one of their daily meetings, "perhaps we should consider that we are dealing with something truly new, something that has never existed before." The Emperor's eyes flashed with anger. "Nothing is new. Everything that exists can be understood, catalogued, and defeated. That is the foundation of our empire." But even as he said these words, the Emperor felt a cold fear growing in his heart. For the first time Admiral Torvex was known throughout the Vraxian Empire as their greatest military mind. He had won battles against species that other admirals couldn't even understand. His flagship, the Eternal Conquest, was the most advanced warship ever built, equipped with sensors that could detect a single atom of foreign material from 1,000,000 kilometers away. But now, as he led Battlegroup Sigma into the empty space where Battlegroup Epsilon had vanished, he felt something he had never experienced before. Uncertainty. "Report," he ordered his science officer. "Sir, we're detecting the same energy residue that was found before, but our computers still can't identify what caused it. The patterns don't match anything in our databases." Admiral Torvex studied the readings on his main screen. The energy signatures were definitely there, but they seemed to shift and change every time they tried to analyze them. It was like trying to grab smoke with their bare hands. "Deploy all sensor arrays," he commanded. "I want every cubic meter of space scanned. Whatever destroyed Epsilon has to leave some kind of trail." His fleet spread out across the area, 25 of the Empire's most powerful ships working together. They used sensors that could see through solid matter, detect movement across dimensions, and track energy signatures across time itself. For 3 days, they found absolutely nothing, but they were being watched. Captain Min-Ho Park floated in the command chair of the human stealth destroyer Whisper, observing the Vraxian fleet through sensors they couldn't detect. His ship was only 2 kilometers away from Admiral Torvex's flagship, but it might as well have been invisible. The Whisper used quantum cloaking technology that worked by existing in a state of uncertainty. Vraxian sensors could detect objects that were definitely there or definitely not there, but they couldn't detect something that was both there and not there at the same time. "Captain," said Lieutenant Haiwan Ko, the ship's engineer, "the quantum field is stable. We can maintain this position indefinitely." Min-Ho nodded. He had been studying the Vraxian search patterns for days, learning how they thought, how they moved, how they reacted to the unknown. It was time to give them something to react to. "Prepare for a brief decloak," he ordered. "Just long enough for them to see us, then back to quantum uncertainty." The plan was simple, but devastating. By appearing for just a few seconds and then vanishing, the Whisper would create a sensor contact that the Vraxians couldn't explain or verify. Their computers would record the detection, but when they tried to confirm it, there would be nothing there. Decloaking in 3, 2, 1. For exactly 2.7 seconds, the Whisper became fully visible to Vraxian sensors. Every detection system on 25 ships registered its presence simultaneously. Then it vanished again, returning to its quantum state of uncertainty. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, alarms started screaming. "Contact!" shouted the sensor operator. "Unknown vessel bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance 2 kilometers." Admiral Torvex spun around. 2 kilometers? How did something get that close without us detecting it? "I don't know, sir. It's gone now. But it was definitely there." All sensors confirmed it. The Admiral felt a chill run through his body. Nothing could approach a Vraxian fleet undetected, especially not this close. Their sensors watched space for thousands of kilometers in every direction. "All ships, focus scans on that location," he ordered. "Maximum intensity. 25 ships turned their most powerful sensors toward the spot where the contact had appeared. They found nothing. No energy signatures, no physical matter, no disturbance in space itself. According to their instruments, nothing had ever been there. But the computer records clearly showed a contact. The data was real and confirmed by multiple independent systems. "Sir," said the science officer, his voice shaking, "this is impossible. Our sensors don't malfunction. They can't all be wrong at the same time." Admiral Torvex stared at the empty space on his screen. In 40 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. "Run full diagnostics on all sensor systems," he ordered. The diagnostics took 2 hours to complete. Every sensor, every computer, every detection system checked out perfectly. There were no malfunctions, no errors, no problems of any kind. The systems had detected something real, but that something was no longer there. Captain Min-Ho Park watched the Vraxian fleet's frantic activity with satisfaction. Through his ship's advanced sensors, he could monitor their communications, their computer systems, even the stress levels of their crews. "They're starting to doubt their own equipment," reported Lieutenant Ko. "Their confidence is shaking." This was exactly what Earth Command had hoped for. The Vraxian Empire's greatest strength was their absolute faith in their technology and their understanding of the universe. By showing them something that contradicted both, the humans were attacking the foundation of their entire civilization. "Prepare for Phase 2, Min-Ho ordered. "This time, we'll give them multiple contacts." Over the next 6 hours, the Whisper appeared and disappeared 17 times in different locations around the Vraxian fleet. Sometimes it stayed visible for only a second. Sometimes it appeared on only some sensors but not others. Sometimes it seemed to be in 2 places at once. Each appearance was carefully calculated to create maximum confusion. The humans had studied Vraxian psychology extensively and knew exactly how to make them question everything they believed about reality. Admiral Torvex was beginning to lose his mind. His fleet's sensor logs showed dozens of contacts, but every time they investigated, they found nothing. His officers were reporting phantom signals, impossible readings, and equipment that showed things that couldn't exist. "Sir," said his tactical officer, "the crew is getting nervous. They're saying the ships are haunted. Haunted? The Admiral's voice was sharp with anger. We are Vraxians. We don't believe in ghosts. But even as he said it, he wasn't entirely sure anymore. What they were experiencing seemed to go beyond any rational explanation. On the research ship Terra's Hope, engineer Heiwan Ko monitored the psychological effects of the human tactics. Her quantum interference generators were causing the Vraxian sensors to malfunction in subtle ways, making them see things that weren't there and miss things that were. The more advanced their detection equipment is, the more confused it becomes, she explained to Dr. Sujin Lee, the fleet's chief psychologist. Their sensors are designed to work with normal physics. When we introduce quantum uncertainty, they start producing impossible results. Dr. Lee nodded as she watched the stress readings from the Vraxian ships. Their crews are reaching breaking points. Some of them are starting to refuse duty assignments. They're afraid to trust their own instruments. This was the brilliance of the human strategy. Instead of fighting the Vraxians with superior firepower, they were fighting them with superior understanding of reality itself. The humans had learned to use quantum mechanics as a weapon, turning the Vraxians' own advanced technology against them. Admiral Torvex called an emergency meeting of his senior officers. They gathered in the main briefing room, 20 of the most experienced Vraxian military officers in the galaxy, but now they all looked tired and confused. I want theories, the Admiral said. What are we dealing with? Captain Zekthara, his science officer, spoke first. Sir, the sensor readings suggest technology that can manipulate space-time itself, but such technology should be impossible according to all known physics. Maybe our physics is incomplete, suggested Commander Yil Vera. Maybe there are principles we don't understand. This statement shocked everyone in the room. Vraxians believed their science was perfect and complete. The idea that they might not know everything was almost unthinkable. Impossible, said Admiral Torvex, but his voice lacked conviction. We have studied the universe for 3,000 years. We understand how everything works. But as they spoke, more phantom contacts appeared on their sensors. Ships that existed for seconds before vanishing, energy readings that made no sense, weapon signatures that violated the laws of physics. The psychological pressure was working exactly as the humans had planned. The Vraxian fleet, once confident and powerful, was becoming paranoid and frightened. They were jumping at shadows, firing at empty space and doubting their own senses. Captain Minho Park decided it was time for the final phase of his mission. The whisper would reveal itself one more time, but this time it would stay visible long enough for the Vraxians to get a good look at it. All stations prepare for full decloak, he ordered. Let them see what they're really dealing with. The human ship materialized directly in front of Admiral Torvex's flagship, close enough that they could see it clearly through the main window. It was unlike anything in the Vraxian databases, smooth and organic-looking, with surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. But the most disturbing thing was how it moved. The ship didn't use engines or thrusters. It simply glided through space as if the normal laws of motion didn't apply to it. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. For 30 seconds, the two ships faced each other across the void. Then the human ship began to fade away, not like something hiding behind a cloak, but like something that was choosing to stop existing. Admiral Torvex watched in horror as the impossible ship became transparent, then translucent, then vanished. Emperor Zixthul had enough. 2 battle groups destroyed, his fleets seeing ghosts, and his scientists finding nothing in the archives. The greatest empire in galactic history was being made to look foolish by an unknown enemy. This had to end. Assemble. The Grand Fleet, he ordered from his throne. His voice echoed through the palace communications system, reaching every military base in the Empire. I want every available ship, every weapon, every soldier. We will find these phantoms and destroy them utterly. Grand Admiral Zethkorva bowed deeply. She was the Empire's supreme military commander, a veteran of countless campaigns who had never lost a battle. Your Majesty, how large a force do you require? All of it, the Emperor replied. I want a fleet so massive that it blocks out the stars. 300 capital ships minimum, 1,000 support vessels, enough firepower to crack planets. Within days, ships began arriving at the staging area in the Nexus sector, the Empire's most heavily defended region. massive dreadnoughts that were each the size of a small moon, carrier ships that held squadrons of fighters, science vessels, packed with the Empire's most advanced detection equipment. The Grand Fleet was a sight that inspired awe and terror across the galaxy. When it was fully assembled, it stretched across millions of kilometers of space. The combined firepower could have destroyed entire star systems. Nothing in recorded history had ever survived against such overwhelming force. But the humans were ready. Captain Jae-hyun Nam stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, humanity's flagship. Unlike the massive Vraxian vessels, the human ship was sleek and graceful, built for speed and stealth rather than raw power, but looks could be deceiving. "Fleet status report," he requested. Lieutenant Yujin Han checked her displays. "All 50 ships are in position, Captain. Quantum drives are synchronized and ready. Only 50 ships against 300. By traditional thinking, it should have been a massacre, but the humans weren't using traditional thinking." Commander. Woo-Sung Lim, the fleet's tactical coordinator, studied the Vraxian formation through their advanced sensors. "They're using standard Empire battle doctrine, Captain. Massive ships in defensive formations, designed to overwhelm through superior firepower." Jae-hyun smiled. "Which means they're predictable. They'll try to surround us and destroy us through sheer numbers. They can't imagine any other way to fight." This was humanity's greatest advantage. While the Vraxians had spent 3,000 years perfecting their technology, they had become rigid in their thinking. They fought the same way against every enemy, using the same tactics that had worked for millennia. But humans were different. Earth's history was filled with wars, conflicts, and struggles that had forced human military thinking to evolve and adapt. They had learned to be creative, flexible, and unpredictable. Grand Admiral Zeth Korva reviewed the battle plans one final time. Her fleet was arranged in 7 concentric circles, each one designed to catch any enemy that tried to escape the inner rings. It was the same formation that had conquered entire galaxies. "Begin the advance," she ordered. The massive Vraxian fleet moved forward like an unstoppable wall of metal and energy. Their sensors swept space ahead of them, searching for any sign of the enemy. For hours, they found nothing. Then, suddenly, the humans revealed themselves. 50 ships materialized out of quantum space in perfect formation, arranged in a complex 3-dimensional pattern that hurt to look at. The human vessels seemed to exist in multiple places at once, their images shifting and flowing like mirages. "Contact!" shouted the Vraxian sensor operator. 50 enemy vessels bearing directly ahead." Grand Admiral Zeth Korva stared at the display in shock. The enemy ships were tiny compared to her massive dreadnoughts. How could such a small force challenge the greatest fleet in galactic history? "Open fire!" she commanded. "All ships, maximum firepower." 300 Vraxian ships opened fire simultaneously. The amount of energy released was enough to boil away the atmosphere of a planet. Beams of coherent light, streams of exotic particles, and projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed all converged on the human fleet. But something impossible happened. The weapons passed right through most of the human ships, as if they weren't really there. Only a few of the ships seemed to take damage, and even then, the damage appeared to heal itself almost instantly. "What's happening?" Grand Admiral Zeth Korva demanded. "Why aren't our weapons effective?" The science officer checked his instruments frantically. "Ma'am, the enemy ships appear to be existing in quantum superposition. They're simultaneously real and not real. Our weapons can only affect the real portions." This made no sense to the Vraxian commander. Ships were either there or they weren't. They couldn't be both at the same time. But the evidence was right in front of her eyes. Captain Jae-hyun Nam watched the Vraxian attack with calm satisfaction. "Quantum displacement holding steady," he reported to his fleet. "All ships maintain superposition status. The human ships were using technology that the Vraxians couldn't comprehend. By existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously, they could be attacked but not destroyed, hit but not damaged. It was like trying to fight shadows with swords. "Begin counterattack," Jae-hyun ordered. The human weapons were as impossible as their defenses. Instead of trying to overpower Vraxian shields, they simply convinced reality that the shields had never existed. Instead of destroying armor, they persuaded the universe that the armor was made of fragile glass. One by one, Massive Vraxian dreadnoughts began to come apart. But they weren't exploding in the traditional sense. They were simply ceasing to exist as if someone was erasing them from reality itself. "How is this possible?" Grand Admiral Zeth Korva screamed as she watched her ships vanish. "Our shields are impenetrable. Our armor is the strongest in the galaxy." But her protests meant nothing. The human weapons operated on principles that went beyond normal physics. They attacked not just matter and energy, but the basic concepts that held reality together. Captain Nam coordinated his fleet's movements with practiced ease. Each human ship moved independently but in perfect harmony with the others, like dancers performing an intricate ballet. They flowed around the Vraxian formations, striking where the enemy was weakest and vanishing before the Vraxians could respond. "There. Formation is collapsing," reported Commander Lim. "They're trying to adapt, but they can't understand what they're fighting against." This was exactly what Earth's strategists had predicted. The Vraxians were trained to fight enemies that followed the same rules they did. When faced with something that operated on completely different principles, their military doctrine became useless. Dr. Kyungmin Seo, the fleet's chief scientist, monitored the battle from the research ship Harmony. "The quantum resonance is working perfectly," she reported. "Their sensors can't track us properly because we're not following classical physics." The human ships could appear in multiple locations simultaneously, attack from directions that didn't exist, and defend themselves with weapons that the Vraxians couldn't even detect. It was like watching ancient warriors with swords trying to fight modern soldiers with energy weapons. Grand Admiral Zeth Korva made a desperate decision. "All ships, ramming speed. If we can't destroy them with weapons, we'll crush them with our hulls." It was a tactic born of desperation rather than strategy. The massive Vraxian ships accelerated toward the human fleet, hoping to use their superior size and mass to overwhelm the enemy. But the humans simply phased through them. The Vraxian ships passed harmlessly through the human vessels as if they were made of light and shadow. Some Vraxian ships collided with each other in the confusion, causing more damage to their own fleet than the humans had inflicted. Captain Jae-hyun watched the chaos with a mixture of satisfaction and pity. These Vraxians were brave soldiers fighting for their empire, but they were completely out of their depth. It was like watching children try to fight a hurricane. "Cease fire," he ordered. "Broadcast surrender terms on all frequencies." The human message was transmitted in perfect Vraxian. "To the forces of the Vraxian Empire, you have fought bravely, but you cannot win against an enemy you don't understand. We offer you the chance to surrender with honor. Respond within 1 hour." Grand Admiral Zeth Korva stared at the message in disbelief. Half her fleet was gone, erased from existence by impossible weapons. The remaining ships were damaged and demoralized. Her crews were beginning to panic, some of them even abandoning their posts. But surrender. The Vraxian Empire had never surrendered to anyone. It was unthinkable. "Continue the attack," she ordered, though her voice lacked conviction. The remaining Vraxian ships fired again, but their weapons were even less effective now. The human ships seemed to be learning from each attack, becoming more and more difficult to target. It was as if the enemy was evolving in real time. Dr. Seo smiled as she watched her quantum adaptation algorithms work. "The neural network is analyzing their attack patterns and adjusting our defensive matrix accordingly. Each shot they fire makes us harder to hit." The humans weren't just using superior technology, they were using adaptive technology that improved itself during combat. The longer the battle lasted, the more hopeless the Vraxian position became. After another hour of futile attacks, Grand Admiral Zeth Korva finally accepted the impo. Scholar Quindara stood at the entrance to the lost archives of Morthak, feeling the weight of 3,000 years of history pressing down on her. The archives were older than the Empire itself, carved into an asteroid that drifted in the dark space between galaxies. Most Vraxians had forgotten they even existed, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The Empire's greatest fleet had been defeated by an enemy that shouldn't exist. If answers couldn't be found in the modern archives, perhaps they lay buried in the ancient past. "Are you certain this is safe?" asked archaeologist Vexalana, Quindara's assistant. The young Vraxian had never been this far from civilization before. The journey to Morthak had taken weeks, traveling through regions of space that were empty and cold. "Nothing is certain anymore," Quindara replied. "But these archives, contain records from before the Empire was established. If our enemy has been encountered before, the evidence would be here. The entrance to the archives was guarded by an elite strike force led by Commander Kylthanor. His soldiers were nervous, constantly checking their sensors for any sign of the phantom attackers. The defeat of the Grand Fleet had shaken the military's confidence badly. "Perimeter is secure," the commander reported. "But I don't like this place. Too many shadows, too many places for enemies to hide." Scholar Quindara understood his concern. The lost archives were a maze of tunnels and chambers carved deep into the asteroid's core. Ancient Vraxian technology kept the atmosphere breathable and the temperature stable, but the place felt dead somehow, like a tomb. Far away, on Earth, Dr. Kyung-Soo Bae was having the most important meeting of his career. As humanity's chief historian, he had spent decades studying ancient Vraxian texts, learning their languages and understanding their culture. Now his knowledge was crucial to the war effort. "They're going to find the old records eventually," he told General Min-Soo Park during their secure video conference. "The lost archives contain survey reports from when the Empire was young and still exploring new regions of space." General Park leaned forward in his chair. "And those reports mention Earth?" "Not Earth specifically, but our solar system. The survey team that visited us labeled the system as uninteresting and marked it for possible future colonization. But they noted the presence of primitive life forms on the third planet." Dr. Bae pulled up the ancient Vraxian text on his screen. The writing was thousands of years old, but he could read it fluently. "Here's the interesting part. The survey report mentions that the primitive life forms showed unusual neural complexity and unpredictable behavioral patterns. The Vraxian scouts were actually worried about us." This was the cruel irony of the situation. Ancient Vraxians had recognized that humans might be dangerous if they ever developed advanced technology. But by the time humanity reached the stars, the Empire had grown so confident in its supremacy that they had forgotten their ancestors' warnings. Linguist Dr. Yoon Young Shin joined the conversation from her research station. "I've been analyzing Vraxian historical texts for references to species that think differently than they do. There are scattered mentions throughout their literature of races that twist reality with their minds and build weapons from impossible dreams." "Are those references to humans?" General Park asked. "Some of them might be," Dr. Shin replied. "But they're written in such old dialects that they're hard to translate accurately. The Vraxians might have encountered other species like us in the distant past." Back in the lost archives, Scholar Quindara was making her way through chambers that hadn't been visited in centuries. Ancient stone walls were covered with carvings that told the story of the early empire's expansion across the galaxy. Most of the text was faded and difficult to read. "Here," said archaeologist Vexalana, pointing to a section of wall. "This talks about the Great Survey, when our ancestors mapped the outer regions of the galaxy." Quindara studied the ancient writing carefully. The language was archaic, using forms that had been out of use for millennia. "It mentions species of unusual cognitive development, races that posed theoretical future threats." "Theoretical threats?" Vexalana looked confused. "What does that mean?" "According to this, our ancestors identified several species that were primitive at the time but showed potential for dangerous development. They recommended monitoring these species closely." Quindara's excitement grew as she read further. "There's a list of star systems that were marked for special attention." Commander Kylthanor approached from his guard position. "Scholar, we're detecting energy signatures in the deeper chambers. Someone or something might be down there." Quindara felt a chill run through her body. Were the phantom attackers here? Had they found the archives too? But as they ventured deeper into the ancient complex, they found something even more disturbing than enemy soldiers. In the deepest chamber of the archives, they discovered a vault that had been sealed for thousands of years. The locks had been designed to keep something in, not to keep intruders out. "What could our ancestors have been so afraid of that they locked it away like this?" Vexalana whispered. "When they finally broke the ancient seals, they found physical artifacts instead of just written records. Samples of technology, fragments of spacecraft, even preserved biological specimens from the species their ancestors had encountered and feared. One of the specimens was immediately recognizable. It was a small piece of genetic material, carefully preserved in stasis. The genetic code was complex, more complex than any known Vraxian DNA. But most disturbing of all, it was still active after thousands of years, as if it was waiting for something. "By the void," Quindara breathed. "This genetic sample. It's from the same species that's attacking us now. Our ancestors encountered them thousands of years ago." On the human research vessel Discovery, Admiral Taejin O was monitoring Vraxian communications with growing amusement. The enemy was frantically searching through their oldest records, trying to find some clue about humanity's origins. "Should we interfere?" asked Dr. Hyo-Jin Kim, the ship's xenobiologist. "If they find the old survey reports, they'll know exactly where we came from." Admiral O shook his head. "Let them find it. When they realize they had the information all along but chose to ignore it, it will break their confidence even more." This was part of humanity's psychological warfare strategy. The Vraxians' greatest weakness wasn't their technology or their military, it was their absolute belief in their own superiority. When they discovered that they had dismissed humanity as unimportant, it would shatter their self-image completely. Back in the archives, Scholar Quindara was reading the most disturbing document she had ever encountered. It was a detailed report from an ancient Vraxian scout team that had made contact with early human civilization. "Listen to this," she told Vexilana. "The bipedal species shows remarkable adaptability and learning capacity. Their neural patterns are unlike anything we have encountered. They seem capable of conceptual thinking that operates outside normal logical frameworks." The report continued. Recommendation: this species should be monitored closely. If they ever develop advanced technology, they could pose a significant threat to Imperial security. Their unpredictable nature makes them impossible to control through conventional means. But the most chilling part was the final notation. Request denied. Species deemed too primitive to warrant continued surveillance. System marked as low priority for future colonization. The ancient Vraxians had understood the danger, but their descendants had been too arrogant to listen. They had dismissed humanity as irrelevant and paid the price 3,000 years later. "We have to get this information back to the Emperor immediately," Quindara said. "He needs to understand what we're really dealing with." But as they prepared to leave the archives, Commander Kyle Thanor's worst fears came true. His sensors detected the approach of unknown ships, moving in patterns that defied conventional physics. Captain Sang-Min Lee commanded the human stealth ship Shadow Walker as it approached the lost archives. His mission was simple: ensure that the Vraxians found the information they were looking for, but not until humanity was ready for them to find it. "Target acquired," reported his tactical officer. "Vraxian expedition team, minimal security force, no significant threat. Remember, we're not here to fight," Captain Lee said. "We're here to deliver a message. Make sure they understand that we've been watching them for much longer than they realize." The human ship decloaked directly above the archives, its presence immediately detected by the Vraxian security force. But instead of attacking, it simply hovered there, silent and menacing. Commander Kyle Thanor stared at his sensors in terror. The unknown ship was beautiful and terrible, its hull seeming to shift between solid matter and pure energy. It was clearly far more advanced than anything the Empire could build. Then the ship began to transmit, broadcasting a message directly into the archive's communication system. The voice that spoke was calm, measured, and spoke perfect ancient Vraxian, the same dialect used in the oldest records. "To the scholars of the Vraxian Empire," the voice said, "you seek knowledge of our origins. You will find what you seek in Section Gamma 7, subsection Outer Rim Survey Reports. We have been waiting for you to remember us." Scholar Quindara felt her legs go weak. The attacks. Emperor Zixthul sat alone in his throne room, staring at the report Scholar Quindara had brought back from the lost archives. The ancient document lay before him like a death sentence, its words burning into his consciousness with every reading. 3,000 years. For 3,000 years, the information had been there, waiting in the archives. His ancestors had known about the humans, had warned about their potential danger, had recommended careful monitoring. But somewhere along the way, the Empire had grown too confident, too certain of its own superiority, to remember an old warning about primitive aliens. The throne room, once a symbol of absolute power, now felt like a prison. Reports arrived hourly from across the galaxy, each one bringing worse news. Provincial governors were losing control of their sectors. Some were attempting to negotiate separate peace deals with the mysterious attackers. Others were declaring independence from imperial authority entirely. The empire was falling apart, and it was all because of a species they had dismissed as irrelevant. "Your Majesty," came a voice from the chamber's entrance. General Morthek, commander of the Imperial Guard, approached with obvious reluctance. "We have received another communication from the enemy." Emperor Zixthul closed his 4 eyes and sighed deeply. "What do they want now?" "They're requesting a meeting, Your Majesty. They say they wish to discuss terms for coexistence." The word hit the Emperor like a physical blow. Coexistence. Not surrender, not tribute, not submission. Coexistence. As if these humans considered themselves equals to the mighty Vraxian Empire. But after the destruction of 2 battle groups and the defeat of the Grand Fleet, perhaps they were right to think so. Captain Sang-Wook Go stood on the bridge of the human diplomatic vessel New Horizon, watching the approach to the Vraxian capital system. The ship was unlike the stealth vessels and warships that had been humanity's first contact with the Empire. This one was designed to be seen to be impressive, to show that humanity was advanced enough to deserve respect. "Incoming transmission from Vraxian High Command," reported Communications Officer Mi Jung Seo. "They're granting us safe passage to the capital world, but they want to know our intentions." Sang-Wook smiled. "Tell them we come in peace, seeking dialogue between our peoples, and tell them in their own language, use the formal diplomatic protocol from their oldest texts." This was part of humanity's strategy. By speaking ancient Vraxian better than modern Vraxians could, they were demonstrating just how thoroughly they had studied the Empire. They knew Vraxian culture, history, and psychology better than the Vraxians knew their own. Dr. Chong-Ho Ryu, the mission's strategic analyst, reviewed the latest intelligence reports. "The Empire is fragmenting faster than we predicted," he told Captain Go. 17 sectors have declared independence in the past week. Provincial governors are openly defying imperial orders. "That's what happens when absolute certainty meets absolute proof that you're wrong," Sang-Wook replied. Their entire worldview was based on the idea that they knew everything. When we showed them something they didn't know, we didn't just defeat their fleets, we broke their fundamental understanding of reality. On the rebel world of Nexar Prime, Governor Velandra made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. She was going to defy the Emperor and seek a separate peace with the human attackers. "Send a message to the unknown forces," she ordered her communications officer. "Tell them that Nexar Prime wishes to negotiate." Her advisors looked shocked. "Governor, this is treason against the Empire." "The Empire is finished," Velandra replied coldly. "Can't you see that? These humans have technology we can't understand and weapons we can't defeat. The Emperor's pride will destroy us all if we don't act." She wasn't alone in this thinking. Across the galaxy, provincial leaders were reaching the same conclusion. The old certainties were gone. The Empire's claims of invincibility had been proven false. It was time to adapt or die. Admiral Jun-Ho Kim commanded the overall human fleet. From his flagship, the Unity. As the supreme commander of humanity's space forces, he had the responsibility of coordinating not just military operations, but also the complex diplomatic missions that were now reaching out to rebellious Vraxian sectors. "Status report on diplomatic contacts," he requested. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon-suk Park, his diplomatic liaison, checked her datapad. 43 Vraxian sectors have reached out requesting negotiations. Most are offering complete autonomy in exchange for protection from imperial retaliation. And our response? "We're accepting all requests for dialogue." Dr. Zhang's cultural integration teams are working around the clock to establish proper communication protocols. Dr. Subin Jung was humanity's lead philosopher and cultural specialist. She had spent years developing frameworks for peaceful coexistence between species with fundamentally different worldviews. Her work was proving invaluable as humans encountered Vraxian populations who were ready to abandon their old certainties. The key, Dr. Zhang explained to her team, is to help them understand that admitting ignorance isn't weakness. It's the beginning of wisdom. For 3,000 years, they've believed that knowledge was power, and that they had all the knowledge that mattered. We need to show them that the unknown isn't something to be feared and catalogued, but something to be celebrated and explored. Her teams were working with reformed Vraxian scholars, many of whom had become disillusioned with the Empire's rigid thinking. Together, they were developing new educational curricula, new scientific methodologies, and new philosophical frameworks that could accommodate the reality of an infinite, mysterious universe. Back on the Vraxian capital, Emperor Zixthul made the hardest decision of his long reign. He would meet with the human representatives face to face. The very idea made him sick with humiliation, but he could see no alternative. "Prepare the Grand Assembly Hall," he ordered. "If we must negotiate with these humans, we will do so with proper ceremony." The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest chamber in the Imperial Palace, designed to accommodate representatives from every world in the Empire. It had been used for victory celebrations, for the submission of conquered peoples, for the display of imperial power and glory. Now it would host the Empire's first admission of defeat. Captain Sang-Wook Go and his diplomatic team arrived at the capital in a ship that caused sensation throughout the Vraxian population. The human vessel was sleek and beautiful, its hull seeming to flow like liquid metal. It moved through space with grace and elegance that made Vraxian ships look clumsy and primitive by comparison. "Remember," Sang-Wook told his team as they prepared, "to meet the Emperor. We're not here as conquerors. We're here as equals, offering partnership and mutual respect. The goal is coexistence, not domination." Cultural specialist Mi-jung Seo nodded. "I've prepared greetings in 17 different Vraxian dialects, including some that haven't been used for centuries. That should make an impression." Strategic analyst Chang Ho Ryu was more cautious. "Be careful not to humiliate them too much. A cornered enemy can be dangerous even when they're beaten." The meeting took place in the Grand Assembly Hall, with Emperor Zixthul on his throne facing the human delegation. For the first time in his reign, he was meeting with beings who were not his subjects, who did not bow to his authority, who treated him as an equal rather than a superior. Captain Sang-Wook approached the throne with dignity and confidence. When he spoke, it was in perfect ancient Vraxian, using the formal protocols that had been established thousands of years earlier. "Great. Emperor of the Vraxian people," he said, "I am Captain Sang-Wook Go, representative of the United Earth Federation. I come seeking not conquest, but friendship, not submission, but partnership between our peoples." The Emperor stared at the human in shock. Not only was this alien speaking his language perfectly, but he was using forms and phrases that even modern Vraxians had forgotten. How was this possible? "You speak our tongue better than our own scholars," the Emperor said finally. "We have studied your people with great care and respect," Sang-Wook replied. "We know your history, your culture, your achievements. We know that your ancestors once warned about our potential, but those warnings were forgotten in the confidence of your success." This hit the Emperor like a physical blow. They knew about the ancient reports. They knew that the Empire had dismissed them as unimportant. They had been watching, learning, preparing for this moment for longer than he could. "Imagine, what do you want from us?" the Emperor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing that you would not freely give," Sang-Wook answered. "We want peace between our peoples. We want to share knowledge and learn from each other. We want to explore the galaxy together as partners, rather than as conquerors and conquered." Dr. Subin Jang stepped forward, her translator converting her words into flawless Vraxian. "Your empire has achieved great things," she said. "Your technology, your organization, your ability to bring order to chaos, these are admirable accomplishments. But the universe is vast and full of mysteries that no single species can understand alone." She gestured to the holographic displays that showed the galaxy around them. "Out there are wonders beyond imagination, phenomena that challenge everything we think we know about reality. We have learned that the greatest strength is not knowing,